Thank you for joining our webinar, How to Manage Contracts in a Digital World. Thank you very much for your time and thank you very much for your interest. Today we have a panel of speakers. My name is Kevin Kursat Devecioglu. I'm the Managing Director of BIMSRI International. So I'll be presenting BIMSRI International. Today with me, I have Daniel Kohlberger from KBL Kohlberger Law Firm based in New York. So we will hear from Daniel with regards to his expertise in contract management and contracting. And also today with me, there is Anderson Wang. He is our process software engineer at BIMSRI International. So we'd like to thank you for your interest and thank you for joining us today in this webinar. This is a live webinar, so please keep your microphones muted. And if you have any questions, please type your questions in chat box. We will address your questions during the Q&A session. So let me give you some brief information about BIMSRI International, about who we are and what we do, and then we'll connect Danielle and we'll learn about fundamentals of contract management. We are BIMSRI International. We are an enterprise software maker since 1998. We are based in New York, and in essence, we believe in simplicity. We help companies simplify their processes with the help of our software products. We are a group of companies. Our software development center and our global headquarters is based in Istanbul metro area, where the yellow dot is on the map. We have another company in Europe, in the Netherlands, for our European sales and development operations. As I mentioned earlier, BIMSRI International is based in New York. As a group, we are about 150 people. We are a growing organization. BIMSRI is a certified SAP vendor, a Microsoft Gold partner, and Cloud ERP Acumetica's independent software vendor. Also, please keep in mind that BIMSRI is ISO 9001 certified, ISO 271 certified, and it has a Pink Verified certification for EBA ITSM ITOM solution. Let me give you brief information about our product range. We have been very focused since 1998. That makes us a specialist. We have EBA. EBA is our workflow and records management platform. One can develop solutions on EBA to automate processes and to digitize forms and internal processes. We have BIM. BIM is an asset maintenance and purchasing management, energy management software. It helps companies manage their machinery, equipment, and units, fleet, cars, trucks in electronic environment. You can manage maintenance operations and you can manage assets and you can track them. Also know that BIM is certified by Acumetica Cloud ERP system. So that is already integrated with Acumetica currently. QDMS is a quality, risk, and compliance management software. It is very helpful and instrumental for complying ISO, BRC, SQF, FTA kind of standards in an electronic environment. Finally, we have Ensemble. Ensemble is our business process management tool. When we look at our product range, Ensemble is more of a managerial tool with performance management and KPI capabilities. EBA, BIM, and QDMS, they automate processes. All of our products, they can work standalone, they can be integrated with each other, and they can be integrated with any system, any ERP, any CRM system available in the marketplace via web service APIs. Here you can also see the number of clients that we have globally. We have a lot of clients and they are growing every single day. These are some of our references available on the screen right now. These are enterprise references available. On the screen, we have more references available also in mid-market and different verticals as well. 3M is one of our clients using our workflow engine in 17 different countries. We have United Nations. They are using our records management and document management system in Syria for refugee tracking. We have Ford and Renault-Nissan Alliance as some of our references. We have Arctar Movie Theaters based in California as our reference for our workflow engine. We have Bridgestone in manufacturing and AstraZeneca in pharmaceutical industries as some of our references. We have more references available on our website. So in a nutshell, that's who we are and what we do. Before we jump into contract management solution that actually was put together by one of our solution partners called Nacsoft, we like to learn about contract management and what are the fundamentals of contracting, what we should be careful about, For these essentials, for these fundamental information with this knowledge, I like to turn the mic to Daniel Kohlberger from Kohlberger Law, and I love to learn from him. Daniel, would you like to continue from here? I'll make you the. I think you're available already.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. I'll leave the floor to you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for leaving the digital floor to me. Yeah. First of all, again, thank you, Chris. Thank you, Binzer, for having me. It's a real honor, and also thank you to my following speaker, Anderson, to be part of this. It's a pleasure. Thank you for everyone joining us and tuning in. As Chris had briefly alluded to, my name is Daniel Kohlberger. I am the founder of Kohlberger Law, which is a law firm with offices here in New York and in Munich, where we primarily represent clients from the software industry. That goes all the way to the left to entertainment software, such as video games, but also all the way to the right, developers of software, distributors of software, and in the middle, tech startups here in New York. We represent these clients primarily in their move from the US to the EU or in the other direction. Now, we represent these clients in fields basically broadening from the beginning of their founding, from corporate formation and investment, as well as their day-to-day and their long-term transactional work, such as end-user licensing deals, B2B, distribution deals, and so forth. And we end with IP strategy that we conduct with the client together regarding protection, enforcement, and registration. Just briefly about myself, I'm US born, but grew up in Germany and the UK, and I'm licensed to practice law in Germany and in New York. Now, as Chris had already said, with this panel is about contract management through software. To be able to do that, you have to also have a fundamental understanding of what goes into a contract, why are contracts actually there, in particular written contracts, and what do they actually do? Obviously, we can't dive too deeply into everything. We have 15 minutes. So I'd appreciate it if you would address questions, as Chris had mentioned, at the end in the Q&A. I will try to give this a top level understanding so you can have a couple of takeaways and kind of gauge every time you set something up, a contract, that you know what are the pillars that we're talking about. So first of all, why do we need written contracts at all? And this is a prime principle. We don't actually need any written contracts. We could just agree verbally to anything that we like, as long as it is not illegal or we're forcing someone. And we can do that without any form. We can do that verbally, non-verbally, written, digitally, in any way you like to have it. As an example, Kursad could offer me his pencil that is value 50 cents for $500 million. We could agree to that verbally. Now, I would have to pay him. Now, if he tries to enforce that in front of the courts, he will have difficulties proving that, because it's a ridiculous deal, even though I'd be a bad businessman. So that shows that this written agreement, be it digital or on a piece of paper, is already fundamental to showing that the deal actually happened. Now, aside from that, we do need, law does require in certain scenarios that we have a written agreement, in particular, if we are talking about agreements over software, such as licensing deals. The US law requires that there is a written agreement in place anytime we transfer copyright or patents. So aside from the necessity to show that a contract actually happened and that sometimes law requires it, the most fundamental benefit of a contract is that it gives you clarity and predictability as to what you should do and what you can expect other parties to do. Now, when you set up a contract, there'll be an abundance of terms that you're going to have to consider. You're going to have to consider many obligations and responsibilities regarding what you're actually buying, but also ancillary obligations. You're going to have to clarify who's going to take the risk for if something goes wrong and who's carrying the liability. Now, if you go through a contract, the decisive thing is, in the end, is that you're signing this and that you're going to be legally bound, and this can be enforced against you. And this brings me to the next just pillar of a contract in general, which is, it gets you thinking about the deal you want to strike, because you're going to be legally bound by this. In essence, and this is kind of where I would like to kick it off for the contract management, is the contract itself can only be as good as a deal that you strike in the beginning. So you're going to have to negotiate and use your leverage and have certain tools and frameworks in place that allow you to actually set up a proper deal in the beginning before you go and draft the contract. So with knowing that, what does a contract just on a broad spectrum really do? So a contract does, in essence, and this is how you would have to also structure your management tool, does two things. It defines your obligations of you and the other party, and it allocates the risk if something goes wrong. So in simple, your obligations could be deliver a washing machine, and the other party, let's say the reseller, pays for it. Now, when I was talking about the deal structure is so important, I meant you're going to have to upfront, before you sign a contract, define what type of washing machine, what type of feature, and you're also going to have to define how is payment made. Is it upfront? Is it by schedule? Is it later been made? Is it are you going to pay by credit? You're going to pay by check? All these things have to be clarified, because these are the primary obligations that the contract is about. Now, when you're talking about risk allocation, the other pillar of the contract, you're thinking of, in simple, three scenarios. You're thinking about, what if you make a mistake? What if the other party makes a mistake? Or what if a third party intervenes with their mistake? In either of these three scenarios, you can allocate risk to the one or the other party the way you like, but you have to be aware of that. Just to give a couple of examples here, for example, if cargo is lost because of a shipwreck, who's going to be the responsible party? Is it going to be the buyer or the seller? Or if a retailer installs a dishwasher and that floods the end user's kitchen, what are you going to do? Is it going to be the end user who's responsible? Is it going to be the retailer? Is it going to be the reseller? Or is it just going to be the manufacturer? Those are just two examples of where you're going to have to make sure that when you're devising your deal and setting up your contract, that you're going to have to allocate risk based on the negotiation where you make your leverage happen. So essentially the top level here is, and what you're going to have to look at is, a contract's going to say what I have to do, what the other party has to do within a framework of obligations, and who carries the risk for something if it goes wrong. And in simplest terms, find out what the best and what the worst case scenario is and write terms for that. Now, that's the top level. Let's look at what actually goes into a contract and what you really have to consider if you set up a management software for that. So as I've in the beginning said, there are primary obligations like what type of product or what type of services and how much the payment is and how it's supposed to be paid. There are also, however, ancillary obligations. We call them secondary obligations. These are, on the one side, you're going to have to find out what the representations and warranties are that you're going to make. This is not the good itself or the price itself. This is something you're promising that you have done before, or something that you will do in the future after the contract is signed. For example, with a software licensing deal, you have to make clear, if you're the buyer of a software licensing deal, that the seller represents that he has acquired all necessary licenses to authorize him to sell this software to you. In turn, if you are performing some kind of services, you have to make sure that the person who's providing the services will not infringe third-party rights or any law, or abides by certain standards to perform these services. These are secondary obligations. Another very important part of the secondary obligations are the quote-unquote relationship obligations. They have nothing to do with the actual subject matter, the goods and the services and the price. These are just things like confidentiality, non-compete clauses, non-solicitation clauses. And I want to just briefly look at the confidentiality clause, which is very important in any agreement, because this confidentiality clause does not intend to stifle competition. A confidentiality clause intends to incentivize your competitiveness by allowing you to protect your information. Now, when you think about a confidentiality clause, you're going to have to think about two things. First, what's the term of this confidentiality clause? Is it going to be forever after the agreement is over? Is it going to be 1 year? And is it going to be retroactively covering some solicitation phase before the contract was signed? In addition to that, you will have to figure out what type of information is confidential. This is dependent on the industry, on what you consider valuable for your company. This could be any kind of technical or product information. This could be business information, such as strategy and business plans, or financial information. Or like in some cases, it could just be who are your followers on Twitter, to be crass with an example. So you're going to have to figure all of this out. Further down the line, once you've defined what your primary obligations are, what your secondary obligations are, and what the relationship looks like, and who is obliged to do what, you're going to have to look at the risk allocation. And there are two specific clauses in any contract, which are the two most relevant, which is the liability clause and the indemnification clause. Now, the liability clause is that clause that in written contracts is always in all caps and impossible to read. So this clause, basically from the seller's perspective, the person who performs the services, it's his chance here to let his leverage go wild and say, okay, well, my services or my goods, I'm not liable for anything. You could potentially exclude all of that. Now, if the buyer really wants that is another question. So you might want to decide to say, we're capping my liability for the performance of these services at a certain dollar amount, or only for such mistakes that I make. Now, next to the liability clause, there's also the indemnification clause. Indemnification clause is a bit more difficult, but in particular, when you're looking at a contract that's going to cover a longer supply chain, very valuable, because indemnification clause guarantees you, let's say, as a reseller, that if the retailer sues you for a mistake, you can go back to the manufacturer and claim against him to reimburse you for any damages or costs that you incurred because of that claim by the third party. When you draft this, you're going to have to be entirely aware about what type of claims is this going to cover that the third party may bring against you, and what type of damages as well, be it just actual damages, opportunity costs, punitive damages. There's a lot of points you're going to have to hit. And lastly, you're going to have to also define who's going to be responsible in defending this claim against the third party. Will it be the indemnifying party, or will it be the indemnified party? Now, once you've decided on, hey, these are my main obligations, these are my secondary obligations, this is how I'm going to allocate risk in these obligations, I have to figure out what happens if this contract actually ends. So this is where we get into the termination clause. Termination clause can be either natural end to a contract when you agree on it's going to be a year or a 2 year, or you could prematurely have a contract end by a termination clause. Now, particularly when you're talking about a termination clause, you're going to have to figure out who can actually prematurely terminate, the seller or the buyer, and in which case can he do that? So what has to happen that he can do that? And if that happens, can the other party somehow cure it? So you're going to have to also figure out here who's carrying the risk in the termination. Once you terminate, you have a second question you're going to have to ask yourself. This is, what is the consequence of a termination? Think of this like a divorce, and you have a house. So if you divorce, who gets what? And in the case of just a sale of goods, and the goods have already gone to the other party, if you terminate, can the seller get the goods back? Or does the buyer have to pay for it? What happens with confidential information? What happens with the non-compete clause? You're going to have to think about all the things that we thought of up front, how it happens when you divorce your business partner. So once we've solved that, and I'm going to come to my end here now of what goes into a contract, you've basically clarified everything. However, you still have that annoying part at the end, which are the boilerplate provisions, These are sometimes titled miscellaneous, sometimes titled general. It doesn't really matter how they're titled. The decisive thing about these is they should not be boring. What I mean with that is here you agree with your business partner about excluding or including specific default law. So you can decide in the event that a dispute goes down, how is this dispute going to go down? And in the event that you sign the agreement, how is it supposed to be interpreted and read? And In the event that the agreement is signed, how does it affect the parties actually? So we look at dispute-related clauses in the boilerplate provision. You have to think about a lot of things again. Which law finds the application? Which venue do you have to go to sue? Do you want arbitration? What type of remedies do you allow? Damages or injunction? Can you waive or permit class action suits or jury trials? And who pays for the attorney fees if one or the other party wins? When you look at the agreement-related clauses, you're going to have to consider things like, this is a business-to-business relationship. It's two companies. Who do you actually send a notification under the contract to that business? If you don't have that, it's just going to go to the general mailbox. So you're going to have to designate a contact person in the contract itself. You're also going to have to figure out, as of when is this contract binding? Who is it binding? Is it just binding this party? Is it binding agents? Is it binding successors in the event of a merger or acquisition? You're also going to have to think about, can this be signed electronically? If you, for example, put in it has to be in physical writing and you have a digital contract, you can't actually sign this contract digitally. If you can also include, it can be signed by counterparts, or both parties have to be present at the same time, or they have to do it in front of a notary. Now, as you see, you're going to have to clarify a lot here because this will determine how you can use your agreement. I will finish off with a brief takeaway, and thank you for your attention here. The most important thing when you're devising any kind of contract management software is that you're aware of the fact that you have to clearly define your obligations and the risk, as I was stating before. However, don't ever sign a contract that was not negotiated to flesh out a fully fleshed out deal. And within this negotiation, make sure that you let your leverage that you have dictate the terms and not any kind of default law. I apologize for having talked as a lawyer for 15 minutes. I appreciate your attention, and thank you so much, Chris, for giving me the time.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Well, great insights and very important information that we all need to know as we are in business. Much appreciated. So please, if you can stay with us, at the end, we'll have Q&A session. If there is any question about contract management, fundamentals of contract management, you can address it. That's okay. Thank you very much. So this solution, EBA Contract Manager, is based on EBA platform. As I mentioned earlier, EBA is our workflow and document management platform, and it's been built on top of this platform basically, and it's built by our solution partner Nacsoft. Now I like to turn it to Anderson Wang, Pre-Sales Software Engineer of Windsor International, our own, and Anderson will take it from here. He'll be presenting you Contract Manager, what it is about, what is the scope of it, and he'll be sharing you a brief demonstration. Please keep in mind that please keep your microphones muted. If you have any questions, you can type it in the chat box, and then we'll address it for you. Anderson, would you like to take it from here?
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you. Let me first off thank Kevin for giving the company presentation, running this webinar. Also, thanks to Daniel Koberger for giving his insights on the fundamentals of contract management and what all of the logistics behind a contract is about. Also, thank you everybody else attending this webinar for taking the time to listen to what we have to say. So my portion of this webinar, I will be talking about the contract manager. As mentioned before, it is a solution idea by one of our solution partners, Nacsoft. And this solution idea is powered by EBA. So later I will show us how it actually runs in practice within the system of EBA. To introduce the contract manager, we'll list a few key features at this slide. What's great about the contract manager is that it is a digitalized way of having your forms pass along the internal approval processes to make sure that a contract before it is being signed by a vendor, for instance, is properly approved by the head of purchase or any heads of departments like financial department, for example. It's very quick deployment and integrated with other ERP solutions such as, we have it on our EBA platform, and EBA can easily be linked with other solutions. It's a permission-based application. That means there's a lot of users within the system, and because of that, they have their own interface where they can establish which part of the processes are significant to them. And also along with that, you bring a nice secure and lean infrastructure, and everybody's just in charge of what they need to be in charge of. Everybody's their own expert along the process of contract management. Our platform provides unlimited number of users and unlimited number of contracts. You can even have a mass transfer of the signed contracts within the system. And even on top of that, we have a nice little widget and dashboard, just a nice little visual representation of the contracts that we have signed or approved in the system. In our demonstration, we will be showing the contract manager work with the Cloud ERP Acumatica. So that will be a little example of how we can have that integration step. What are the benefits that can come with Contract Manager? Well, very simply, we have a nice corporate memory. So a single point of access where we can see all of the contracts that we have had all the way down into the past. So a digital contract library in essence. And with that, you have a lot of quick access. You have a strong storage of the contracts, also whichever versions and the history. Any annotations or notes regarding a contract, including comments, they can all be seen and referred to in later on use of the contract. You can also have a follow-up contract validation, as well as termination reminders. So that is also very important. And with all of this types of information, again, you will be able to track that. There's a nice traceability that is reflected in the dashboard and the summary graphics. Being a digitally transformative solution, this is a time saver. And on time saver, meaning that everything is very quick. People transfer the document all through the internet, and that way you are also increasing your efficiency. So the contract manager functions with 3 types of contracts. Later on in this presentation, we'll go into the little workflow or the little the diagram that explains these 3. But to list them off, you can approve and archive a signed contract, a contract that is already signed. If you need it approved before sending it into your system, that can be done with our contract manager. Or you can also control, approve, and sign a contract built out of a template. So there's a way to store a template actually within the document system of EBA, and you can pull up the variables or the terms of that template and fill it out from there. And that way you can make your own contract from that. And there's also the way to create, control, approve, and sign a contract from an entirely new document, and this will involve offering a draft. And as it's going through its approval process, people can make the draft more secure, succinct, and exactly for the task of what the document is for. And at the very end, the creator of the documents will approve it and bring up a more official copy, a signed form of that contract to be sent to the system. So each of these contracts, there are specific concepts that need to be established, and these are the vendor details and the purchasing order details, contract details, penalty terms, and warranty terms. These are all very required for each contract, as we had mentioned in there, what Daniel had mentioned earlier during his presentation. In our case, we're going to be bringing our vendor information and purchasing order information from Acumatica. Sit tight, we'll get right into it when we bring our demonstration, but first, I had mentioned already, we have these process flows. Judging by the simple diagram right here, you have a flow starter. They bring out a signed contract and they want to get it reviewed. So they will send it over to the legal department. The legal department has the option to decide if they want to approve it, or maybe they want to suggest a revision or ask the flow starter to review the contract again. So they can choose to do that, which brings it back to the flow starter. Essentially, this can go in a cyclical order where the flow starter can also ultimately choose to cancel the document. And all of that can be done just through their own specific interfaces, their own particular interfaces or user logins of EBA. But let's say the signed contract goes to approval. The same thing happens. The same process goes with the finance department. Now, the finance department, when they approve, that is when they can either process, they can choose to have the document stored straight into our EBA document management module, but they can also send it to Acumatica, as you will see later. So that is a very seamless integration for any ERP system. And also, it's when you send it to Acumatica, it will also be stored in the EVA document management. So that can be set as well. The next one is templating. I explained this before. You have a template. You use the template to adjust it, prepare it, all the way up until the part where before you want to send it to Acumatica or put it in your document management, you can actually send it to your vendors, or you can ask for internal signatures. This is a way to establish the status of that current contract. That is very important when you are documenting the stages and statuses of the contract for later use. When you look at the history, the timestamps, who was involved, all of that, it gets recorded in the system. And then lastly is a new document contract flow. Very similar, but it is not out of a template. It is just straight out of a new draft. And this process flow is what I will be guiding us through in our demonstration. So to start off, the flow starter is going to be a user named Anderson Way. So I will sign in, and currently I'm Anderson Way. I want to just showcase how the vendor contract management works. So I go into that little establishment here. And to introduce, we have the dashboard, as mentioned earlier, the summary graphic, and a nice visual representation of the contracts that are already stored in here. As you can see, it's very interactive, very real time. You can choose to refresh these as any way you want. You can also see the numbers on it. It's very interactive. Let's say if you want to see only the completed contracts, you will see them here, also by their contract types categorized as such. So that is a little showcase of the summary graphics. Now, when you bring down the vendor contract management, you also see the archive. So if you want a more documental or more informative version of seeing which contracts are in the system, you can do so here. The contract archive is the overall contract, so you can actually scroll all the way down and see the processes or the statuses of those, whether they are approved or in preparing. And you can search in here across multiple fields. So, and also these fields you can be readjusted, dragged and dropped in that matter. So you have full customizability on how you want to maneuver through your archive. So we have the general contract archive, we have the signed contract archive, which is the ones that are completed contracts that are sent into the system, or maybe Acumatica, for instance. And we also have the template caption map. So this is in relation to the template that you use when you are creating a templated contract. And this is in correlation to a template that is already stored in the document management system. And then this dropdown is the parameters that we will be using. So we have the contract types as listed here. This is within the system of EVA. The approvers, these are the people that will be coming into play as we run through our example. These are going to be Anderson, Emily, Lily, and Oliver. As Anderson, Emily, Lily, and Oliver, yes. The vendors and purchase orders for our demonstration, they are going to be coming in from Acumatica. And lastly, we have a customization map, and these are just nice little toggles that you can use for designing your contracts, because these are very important types of fields. Right, so now we will create our form. And again, we're following this backbones design right here. So it is a new contract. I'll go ahead and say new documents, and it'll prepare that kind of layout for us. When we click into vendor IDs, this is coming in from Acumatica, right? So I want to say use this vendor. This is our example vendor, CW Internet. And I can also include a purchase order. So this purchase order also comes in through Acumatica. And I want to say, let's say, purchase order number 67. Everything gets filled out from there. Now you set up your dates, because the dates of the contract are important. Of course, you have the option to choose your activation date as well as the expiration date. So we will date this forward, let's say a year. And also you can adjust how many days prior we can send a reminder. So we'll say 15. Now, I'm going to say a non-disclosure agreement. This is from our contract types, as I showcased earlier in the system. And here you can write the amounts regarding the financials, the finances of this contract. And there's a little explanation there where you can explain this is like a non-disclosure agreement. So there's that. Next up, we have these related fields, the penalty clause. We had mentioned the instances of clauses during a contract managing or contract signing. So here's you would fill out any type of penalty regarding, and here you can say nice little comments or anything regarding this. So like this should be enforced, for example. That can be added into the little commenting or the data behind our contract. So the same can go for the warranty clause, also for the tax clause. So I will say like 18%, for example, and that will be generated there. I can also add the explanation. Here, this field, the explanation is your general comments of the contract overall. This will say, I will say, I am the flow starter. This is important later. People who access this contract in the later steps of the process can also see this type of comment. So there's a lot of communication going on throughout this process flow. There is the opportunity to add a supported document. This document can come in any different types of file types. Right now, I'll attach an image. So that will come alongside the contract itself. So it's nice to keep them all in one place digitally. And lastly, we have our new document. And I'm going to make sure that you upload it as a documents file. Reason being is that document files, you'll see later, you can add a lot of annotations and notes, very customizable and free in that sense for anybody else who has opinions or any notes that they'd like to add to the document. Okay, so without further ado, I will send this contract. After the preparation, it will alert to me that it has gone to Emily Brown, the head of purchase. So now we're at the next step of that workflow, right over here. So allow me to log out and come in back into EBA as Emily Brown. So now I'm signed in as the head of purchase, Emily Brown, and right from her homepage under approvals, we'll see she has 11 pending. One of them just so happens to be the contract that we had prepared previously. So she sees that there's this contract coming in from Anderson Wang, and it is now for her turn to review it. This is where you can actually go into the document itself. There's a document viewer already native into EVA, so it's very nice to have that. So it will display the example, the draft documents that we are working with here. There is a way to add a general notes over it, so she can say this is a note by Emily Brown, and add it on top of that document that everybody can see. So that is nice. Keep a little discussion or back and forth regarding the document. There's also a way to give an annotation. So this annotation view is a way for you to actually make finite comments based on the contents of this document. And now I take the text annotation right here, and let's just say I take the title. I can add the annotation here. This is an annotation on the title. So yes, you have a lot of tools here. You can zoom in and zoom in out. You can actually search through the actual contract, the actual draft. There's ways that you can edit it any way you want. So this is the advantage of having your drafts as a document, right? So now we are done editing that. We can check out, because a lot of the document management within EVA, it goes on through a check-in and a checkout system. That's keeping version control to make sure that no two people are editing the same contract at the same time. Great. So Emily Brown looked through this contract. She made any notes or annotations that she needs, and she will approve it. Again, she could also choose to review it. If she were to do so, the flow would go straight back to Anderson, where he would review the contract and decide if he would like to cancel it or send it through the process again. So again, there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of communication, but that's what keeps it succinct, and that's what keeps it very compliant. Great. Now the history tells us now we are waiting on the head of the legal department, Lily Henderson. So allow me right here, we're at this step of the process. I will log out and log back in as Lily Henderson. Same scenario here. We are going back into our pending tasks. We see the contract that we've been working on in this demonstration. This is where the head of the legal department needs to make sure that this goes with under whatever she is in charge of regarding this contract, and make sure that everything is compliance, right? So that is her task, and she can always go through and add her own comments through this explanation prompt here. And then at the end, she can ultimately approve the documents. So then next up on the workflow, we'll see it's now sent to Oliver Carter, right? So go back to our main menus here, and we see that this the number of approvals here have decremented. So that's the pending tasks. Great. So I'll quickly go back into Oliver Carter. Oliver Carter is our head of the financial department. So he's going to be looking into this contract and making sure everything is succinct with this contract in regards to the finances. And this is a nice way to have everybody in the loop of this approval process, this entire process overall. You see the timestamps of that, of when they viewed it, and also with that, he can approve. And when is that done? You see it goes right back to the flow starter. It's up to the flow starter to go to the next step, and it also says that in our flow history. So now I will finally go back to Anderson. He just had his draft approved, and he had it established through, the head of purchase, the head of the legal department, the head of the finance department. Everybody has say. They were kind of in the memo with this contract that we've been forming here. So Anderson receives it back in his own pending task, and this is up to him to look at the final stuff. So he can actually go back into the documents and see, oh, there's a note. What is a note? Oh, it is by Emily Brown. He can also go into the annotation and find that annotation that we had added earlier. But at this step of the process, it is most important that he adds the final version of this contract. So in this case, we have the example signed contract. This is the a PDF form because it is more secure in that sense. PDFs will be read-only. There's not a lot of writability, so that's that. You see that now Anderson has the options for all of these, and this is also reflected in our process flow here. He can send the draft to the vendor. He can have the vendor sign it. He can also ask for the internals to sign it. This will change the if I click send vendor to sign, this just simply changes the status of the document, of the contract overall, and it is also reflected in our flow history here. But in any instance, let's say the vendor does sign it and the contract comes back. Now I want to save it. I want to store it either in EBA, or I can also send it to store it in EBA and also send it to Acumatica. So let's go on with that process. And there's just a quick integration step. Also, you see here, they'll give you a nice little notification. There's also a nice ring. Everybody will be notified about the completion of this. We're also given the contract number 2019-0128. So that is how we're going to find it in our system, which let's look on the Acumatica side and find the contract that we had just sent in. So I will go by vendor. Because we had access this through our vendor, the CW Internet, I go into the vendor's information on Acumatica, and you can see that there are some attached files. And surely enough, we have our contracts that we had just made. So 2019-0128, and that is it. We have the form right here, and that is the profile of our contract. And we also have the signed contract here, the final PDF. Excellent. And I will also show that you can do this through our purchase orders too, because everything is all together within Acumatica. So I believe we had used product purchase order number 67. Same idea. We have some attached files, and inside we see, yes, 2019 0128, 2019 0128. So that is proof that the contract manager does work in very integratively with Acumatica. You had just seen that we had just devised a contract and sent it straight to that system. Let's also show that it has been in our document management as well. So if we go through our directory of contracts, also our vendors, maybe we can search here for CW Internet, and they have a non-disclosure agreement that is precisely going to be our contract 0128. And within EBA, in the document management, you can see our contract here. And there's also a lot of other metadata here, such as the profile, which is the form version, the form layout of this contract. There's also contents. Contents will point to the draft or anything regarding that. The draft will be under relations. So, and they also give you the nice location on where you can find that within the system. And lastly, there's also the attachments. If you had remembered very early on in the step, we had an attachment here. I can click into that, and sure enough, that is the photo that we had attached to this contract. Yes, and also there's another way to access it. Again, we had explained earlier the archives. If we go back into our signed contract archive, it should also be there as well. So this is to prove, yes, 2019 0128. This is to prove that once you devise a contract regarding any flow, just like the one that we had done here, the new contract document flow. Once you go through those steps, everybody gets involved in the contract. Head of purchase, legal department, financial department, back to the flow starter or whoever's creating the contract itself. He has the option to then send it to the vendors to sign, or ask for other types of signatures for this contract. And lastly, send it to any pre-existing ERP systems such as Acumatica, and also have it stored within the document management of EBA, as well as the archives within the vendor contract management. So that was a little guide through of this type of new contract document flow, and that is that will conclude my demonstration of the contract manager, powered by EBA, our EBA transactional content management platform. And that brings us to our Q&A portion of the webinar. Thank you, Kirsad. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Daniel, for your time. And thank you, everybody, for listening to this portion of me explaining the contract manager. Yes.
Thank you, Anderson. Great presentation, great demonstration with regards to contract manager solution powered by EBA, made by Nacsoft. And that's great. We learned many things about the scope of the solution, and we see how it actually running with the cloud ERP Acumatica. So we presented the product, we demo it. I think it's great. So this is our Q&A session. We'll address your questions. I have some questions already that I have received. So I'll be sharing these questions with our speakers. Just know that we keep the contact information on the screen right now. So for future reference, after this webinar, if you like to get in touch with us, with any of the speakers in our panel, please feel free to reach out and connect us for further discussions, or if you have any questions that you like to share with us. So we'll keep the contact information on the screen for a while. So some of the questions I have received is, can this solution, EBA contract manager, can it be deployed on-premise and also public clouds such as AWS?
Yes, this is a good question. And to answer that, yes, EBA can be run on cloud, just like many of our other products. with Binzer International, we have a focus on our 4 products, and each of them can work on premise or on cloud. So if that answers your question, yes, EVA will work on cloud, and you can also manage your contracts with that type of system. Thank you.
Thank you, Anderson. Another question. So I see EVA Contract Manager is connected to Acumatica. You have showed the integration. Can it be also working with other ERP systems such as Microsoft Sage, etc.? I think I can address this question. Yes. I mean, naturally, the contract manager is developed on EVA platform, and it can work standalone, and as well as it can be integrated with any ERP system actually. So that is the case. In this particular case, we are an official independent software vendor of Cloud ERP Acumatica, so we made the integration with Acumatica, and we present it to you and we demo the integration and how the product is working with Acumatica. However, for any other projects, of course, we can also make some adjustments, and the solution can also work with another ERP system available. That is not a problem for us. Thank you for this question. So it shows the capabilities of our solution and our basically flexibility. Is there any mobile app available that I can run this solution for me to manage our contracts or for approvals and such? Maybe Anderson, you can address. What do you think?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question?
Absolutely. Can I use any mobile app to enjoy the benefits of the solution? Is there any mobile app available for approvals and contract management purposes for this particular solution?
Yes. This is a good question. Yes, there is a mobile app for EVA, and the reason why this is also a really good question is because you can use the capture function within EVA to, bring your unstructured data, physical copies, documents, contracts, and digitalize them through just a photo. That is a great use of using the new technology of having cameras right on our phones. You can easily transition to having a physical documents and digitize them through EVA. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Anderson. I have a question with regards to contract management fundamentals. Daniel, it looks like it is for you. So, in addition to the general information that we need to be careful about contract making, is there anything specific about software making, software-related contract making, or it is basically the same concept, same framework? Daniel?
Yeah, sorry. I just said a short. Give me 1 second. I had someone coming out.
Meanwhile, we can continue with other questions. Can Acumatica or EVA manage line item contract details? It can push the updates to the ERP system. Well, the solution is originally designed for ready-made solution, ready-made contracts. However, to manage the content of the contract, that is also possible in the document management part of EVA, which is also included in this solution. So my answer is yes. The line items can also be managed within the contract. So and it can also be pushed to the ERP system, or it can be kept within EVA. So that is absolutely doable with the capabilities of EVA platform. It is not a problem. Great question. Thank you very much. Let me see if Daniel is with us or he's.
Yes, Chris, sorry about that.
Not a problem. Yes, no problem. Thank you very much.
Very. So, could you repeat the question?
Absolutely. When you make any contracts in software industry, is there anything specific that one needs to be careful about, or the same framework is still?
Good question. Very good question. And yeah. So first of all, the difficulty of diving into contract management from a legal perspective is obviously that you can make a contract more efficient, but at the same time, you're going to always have to take all the steps. So what I believe is the real benefit of a contract management software is facilitating and expediting the processes between each of these steps that I was saying, like we saw in the presentation by Anderson, is making approval processes more efficient, making signatures more efficient, making it more efficient for people to annotate or look at versions. However, it is nearly impossible to make the law itself more efficient. So when you're creating such software or using such software, you will always have to go back to asking yourself why you're actually doing this and always review everything. So it is difficult to answer your question to say you're going to have to be prepared for this or for that. What you're really going to have to be prepared for is that the software will not be able to replace your decision process. It will be able to replace the between decision making is what is going to replace. So as an example, if I send you a contract, Corsat, and it takes you, as an example, 3 days, and it's in your inbox until you see it, that 3 days, the management software can do within seconds. So that is, for me, with contract management, the huge benefit. However, you're still going to have to make entirely sure that your decision process aligns with what you're clicking with your mouse. That's kind of my perspective on that. I hope that answers your question, and if it doesn't, please further allude to what it was.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you very much. Well, especially contract manager is very important in a way that you need to manage the versions of contracts, and you need to also make sure who reviews it and who approves it. And when you need to go back to the previous version, or after a while you need to review the contract, you need to make sure you have the right version, and you need to know who approved it, who reviewed it. So that is important. The reason being, from our experience, contracts evolve depends on the situation and conditions, basically. So in that sense, contract manager can be a lifesaver. That's how it looks. And that's also a great question. Thank you very much, Daniel, for addressing it.
Yeah, I'll just briefly, just to continue on the versioning.
Sure.
So I'll give you an example of how this works if you don't have a contract manager. So let's say you and I, Kurt, said we have a contract to discuss, and we have a other party that this contract is with. We're going to end up on my computer having 10, 15, 20 different documents of exactly the same. This is highly inefficient. Now, at the same time, you can, if you use a contract management tool that manages the versions, you're going to have to watch out that, and this is a classic issue with versioning in general, is that not just people working it at the same time, and that these versionings are consecutive, that it's clearly displayed. And this is a question for the software developer to be able to clearly display the versioning, that no one makes a mistake when they edit these.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, absolutely, that's very important. And it's also heard from you as an expert in law and practicing it. It also shows the importance of it. Well, the good thing is the solution has arrived, and we have EBA Contract Manager, and from now on, all these companies can use the Contract Manager. So that is the idea, I believe, here. So thank you very much for the insight. Appreciate it. Looks like I have covered all the questions so far, and it's been a great webinar and great attendance. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for joining us. As I mentioned earlier, this is our contact information on the screen. If you have any further questions, if you'd like to continue this conversation, please feel free to contact us, and we can address it. So we have presented you EBA Contract Manager for Acumatica. It's tightly integrated with Acumatica, powered by EBA and made by Nacsoft. And we are looking forward to our coming webinars to share more information with you. As you know, we have webinars every single month that you can follow us, and you can also learn more about our solution and software products that's available. Also, please know that we're gonna put our recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel, which is also very active channel that we use and we keep it active regularly. please subscribe our YouTube channel as well, and so that you can be the first one who's gonna watch our webinars. Again, thank you very much for joining us, and looking forward to seeing you in our cabin webinars. Thank you. Have a nice day.